Hey, folks, in this series of your path to perfect home comfort, today we're talking about those hot and cold spots in your house and how zoning can help take care of them. So when you walk from one side of the house to the other, you're within the same couple degrees temperature instead of that freezing on one side of the house and boiling in the other. Stay tuned as we talk about how we can help create that path to perfect home comfort. All right, welcome back to Pro Calcs University. I'm Tom Platania, your host, and I've been having some fun with these. I tell you, I get some great feedback. There's a video that Dana, our COO, did quite a while back on vented versus encapsulated attics, and boy, I tell you, that thing is getting traction. We've gotten so many comments, good and bad. And remember, these videos, there are so many different scenarios that could happen, but we got to crunch in just a little bit. So, you'll see some comments about you forgot to talk about this, you forgot to talk about that. I forget to talk about a lot of things, or not necessarily forget, but I can't talk about it because it's such a small window of opportunity. I don't want to have 2, 3, 4 hour long videos, and I'll lose people's attention. So yes, there are some things that we do miss. There are some controversy out there. That's why we're doing these videos. There are some people that have been doing things a certain way for years and doing it another way for another year. So, but that's also why we've started creating some books to go with each of these videos to help add a lot of the extra content that we just really don't have time to talk about, but also provide a little bit more detail. Now, we have some of these up already on our ProCalcs website. There's going to be links in the video below for you to get to those books. Very inexpensive. The ebook version is only $4.99. We got some books on Amazon as well. But yeah, so great stuff. Really loving the momentum the videos are bringing. Great education. It's helping me learn a lot as well about how people do things all over the country. It's not the same, and that's the amazing part. And that's one of the great things that when my wife and I traveled for the first 4.5 years of this business, we traveled the whole United States, went to 43 states. You can do that you can see that if you go to our procalcs.net website. Under About Us, you'll see a little thing that says Bibadushi RV. When we traveled in the RV, we tracked every state we went to, listed all the things out. But I got to learn a lot about different cultures and how people did things differently in different states. And you would be surprised. Something that you think is a no-brainer in the state of Florida is never heard of in other states, or vice versa. Hey, we do it this way in Maine, and you would mention that to somebody down in Florida and they would have a deer in the headlights look. So it's about having different areas in different ways and being open to those ideas and not closing your mind off that because you don't know or have never used that before, you don't understand the concept behind it. Doesn't mean it's not right. And that's the purpose of education. I don't know everything. I make a lot of mistakes. I say things sometimes, especially because I'm not scripted. I don't want to have a teleprompter up there, and some people would say that that's wrong, and some people say it's more natural. That's what I want. And just like in everyday life, sometimes we'll say something that just spits out like, wait a minute, why did I say that? That's not true. But we do our best to educate you folks. So let's do the hat challenge. So last week we had the hat challenge of Iceland, and I wanted to show you some things. So Iceland, and we visited some beautiful places. Now the largest city in Iceland is Reykjavik. When you go in there, a big city, very congested, kind of older. But once you go in the outside of that main town, it's just absolutely amazing. So we took a tour bus and we went to 2 beautiful spots. One is probably my favorite, and it's the Golden Falls, which is Iceland's most famous waterfall. They have a bunch of other waterfalls, but I want to show you really quick what this waterfall looked like. Just absolutely beautiful. Now, pay attention down here on the bottom. You see all this water from the waterfall. Where's it going? Well, it goes down into a cavern right here, which runs all the way underneath this mountainside. So the water disappears, and it's really cool because you don't see like you go to Niagara Falls and stuff, you see all the water coming down, and then you see the big lake down at the bottom where all the water's going into. This one you don't. It's really cool as we go down. It was about in the high 30s, low 40s when we went down to this huge, gigantic step going downstairs. But just really, really cool. Beautiful, beautiful day. We go to the next slide. This is Iceland. Is that not beautiful? And outside of the main city, this is what pretty much everywhere we went looked like. Just rocks and grass like that, and the water all around, and just, I mean, is that not beautiful? But we just really, really enjoyed it. There's now this here is the Great Geyser. It's in the Haukadalur Valley, or however you pronounce it, Haukadalur. But you walk back in here, and they had pathways that actually went back into where you see the steam and whatnot, and little water streams with steam coming off them. And I think it was like every 15 minutes, the geyser, and we missed it. And it was getting so cold, and we didn't properly prepare for how cold it was going to be. You figure, gosh, Tom, how could you not go to Iceland and be prepared for that cold? Well, we were on a cruise ship, and most of the places we were going to were not even close to being this cold. So we were kind of limited. We ended up buying some things to keep us a little bit warm, but just beautiful, beautiful areas. So really awesome. Hat challenge today, as you can see here, I'm not going to say it out loud. I want you to figure it out, what it is. This was just another stop on one of our trips when we traveled overseas. Like I said, some of it was on a cruise ship, some of it wasn't. This stop was one of the cruise ship stops we went to. We were just there for a day. We got to go to a really cool local spot that was just like down into an area, and I'll show that to you during the next video. But just really awesome local. It was definitely a cultural experience, and it was amazing. And they had these croissant things in there. My wife, like a chocolate croissant homemade, that my wife just, her mind was blown on that. All right, so today we're talking about zoning, and what we're talking about is when you have a home, and let me just show you, for instance. So here's our RightSoft software, and this is a big house that we worked on, and you can see it's 2 stories. There's the second floor, big house, right? Now, when you see the colors, these different colors, when we design our systems in the RightSoft software and we select equipment for different areas, so each of these colors has its own air conditioning system, its own air handler in the attic or in a closet, and its own condenser outside. Now, that is zoning in a sense, okay, where we have multiple systems that can be that's classified as zoning. So you can see we got this big house, and the reason you would zone in this nature is because one system for this whole entire area will most likely be too big for a residential system, which they only go to 5 tons. So being able to break this up into smaller bits allows to have better control, because here we have a north-facing side, we have a south-facing side, east and west. So when we look at this, we say, okay, what's the best way? And also looking at what times you're going to be in here. Like this here, you had an arcade and a bowling alley and a gym. So those are going to be used at completely different times, and they're going to be calling for completely different air conditioning or heating requirements depending on what's going on. Well, if we're not entertaining, we don't want full air conditioning constantly in this area. We may only want to dehumidify. So the purpose of zoning, one, is you could either use individual systems, but the zoning that we're going to talk about is more for the average home, where maybe you only have 1, maybe 2 systems. So we'll use one of these floors as an example. So you see we have the second floor here, which only has 2 air conditioning systems. So let's use the second floor because it's got some bigger areas. So what you're trying to accomplish with zoning is looking at how a house is situated, facing, and then looking at how the heat is going to change in different parts of the building or the home at different parts of the day, whether that be occupants, whether it be heat and outside, So if we have this huge house and we have east facing over here and west facing over here, and I got lots of windows over here, well, when the sun rises, this side, because of all these windows, is going to be a lot hotter than this side over here. And I need to take that into consideration. Most of our homes don't. They have, you're baking at one part of the day and that same section's cooler at the other part of the day. And then come nighttime, you got the west side, it's boiling hot, the other side's cold. So the purpose of zoning is to be able to pinpoint the individual temperatures required in specific areas to make you feel comfortable. And on an average home, and let me kind of show you a little chart here that I have. Okay, so let's switch back over to here. So why is zoning important? Now, zoning is important because not all the time. Let's say we have a house that needs a 4-ton system. So the manual J calculations have said that we need a 4-ton system. However, when we look at the house, and let's go back to this other house and say, okay, let's say this area here was a 4-ton system. It called for 4 tons. Well, you and I both know there's common sense. Early in the morning, no matter what state you live in, early in the morning, if we're talking about air conditioning right now, let's say, early in the morning, the temperature is cooler than at the peak of the day. Also, different times of the month or different months, your temperature is going to fluctuate from the morning to the afternoon, to the late afternoon, to the evening, and then back around again. The problem with non-zone systems is you have 1 tonnage, 5 tons, and no matter what room it is, it's always going to get the same amount of air conditioning all the time. So the thermostat would typically be, let's say here, if we go to here, let's say, where did we have this air handler located? All right, so right here, the air handler was located in a closet right here, okay? So with that, the air handler comes on. So most likely where the return was, and these were not finished products. These are just things we used in-house. So you can see we have a return. So we have a return grill here. We have return grills in the bedrooms. So most likely, if this whole area here is not zoned, it's just one system, most likely you're going to find your thermostat is going to be located somewhere centrally in a hallway, or somewhere by the main return, but somewhere where there's not a lot of heat penetrating it. All right. However, if we put the thermostat here, the thermostat is only going to read the temperature in this area. Okay. If that's where we put the thermostat. This is pool table. I would need to know more about this to determine, but most likely they put the thermostat probably somewhere right around here. So they put the thermostat there. So we sense the temperature. Let's say we wanted 75 degrees in the house. So the thermostat here, which is by the return, that's what you want. You want to sense the air going in. It's saying, hey, it's 75 degrees. And in this area here, it's 75 degrees. But later in the day, when we're on the west side and we're baking down into these, now that these areas over here maybe have some overhead because they're part of this portion here with the first and second floor. So let's say these rooms over here are getting a lot more sun and heat with this double sliding glass doors and all this stuff versus over here. These rooms are going to be a lot hotter. So what happens? The thermostat over here is saying, hey, I'm 75 degrees. I'm happy as could be, and I'm shutting off. But what's going to happen is this bedroom over here is going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees or more hotter because it's more direct heat. So the person in this bedroom over here, it's going to be a lot hotter. So what do? They walk down the hallway here. They come all the way down. They go to the thermostat. And they crank the thermostat down because I'm hot. So now they're having to get the thermostat over here down to 70 degrees just to get the temperature over here down to 75 degrees. All right. And now we're running and we're wasting a lot of energy that we need. So zoning helps to be able to better control your temperature in individual spaces, proper zoning, without running your entire system or overcooling every other part of the house just to keep that one area down to the right temperature. And what zoning does is it uses some different devices. Now I'm going to come back to this picture over here. And what this picture was here is, this is when we're getting into when you're properly zoning, and we're going to show you some components for zoning. When you're properly zoning, a standard air conditioning system, and I know I'm going to get flack from this, and we can go back and forth all day long for you tech savvy people out there, is an air conditioning system that comes on, goes up to 1 tonnage and shuts off, is not the proper system for zoning. Okay. All right. Here's where these guys are going to kick in and go, he's full of it. No. Yes, you can take a system that's one size and one size only, and you can put what's called a bypass damper. And I don't want to get technical. When I do the book, I'm going to get real technical about bypass dampers. The problem is most air conditioning manufacturers do not allow what's called a bypass damper. And what that is if the unit's coming on at 4 tons and you only need half of that capacity because one room is calling for cooling and the rest of the house isn't, that 4-ton system has to still come on at 4 tons. So you're still pumping 4 tons of air conditioning in the house, but what you're doing is whatever air is not being used for that one small section, you'll have this special damper that works off of pressure that will then open up and allow some of the other 2 tons of air to go back around into the return on the air conditioning system, and then basically dumping that air back in. Well, you're defeating the purpose of zoning. Zoning is to help one, control specific areas better, but also to create energy efficiency so you don't have 4 tons of air conditioning coming on when you don't need 4 tons of air conditioning. All right. And bypass dampers cause a lot of issues because now you're mixing extremely much cooler air back into the unit, which can cause the coils to freeze. And then what they have is another band-aid called a freeze stat, which determines that the coil is going to start freezing, and it adapts, shuts it down for a minute or whatnot. So, but the proper way, I'm not here to say that, you can't make it happen and somebody hasn't made it happen and it's not working someplace. There's a difference between, do we do it the right way, or just do we do it the way we can make something work by putting a lot of rubber bands and band-aids and twisty ties and things like that. The proper way to zone is to have what's called a variable speed or an inverter system. Okay. Now here's what this curve does is it tells us that, early in the morning, it may be 75, 80 degrees out. And the house, when we do a load calc on the entire home, it says, hey, we need 4 tons for the entire house at the peak. So at the peak, when it's about 92, 93 degrees out, this house needs 4 tons of air conditioning. But wait a minute, what's the purpose of air conditioning? It's to remove heat, unwanted heat from inside a home, to dump it back outside using the refrigerant, okay, and the condenser and air handler. Well, if I'm not that hot and I'm sizing a 4-ton unit to be able to cool the house when it's 93 degrees outside, when it's not 93 degrees outside, I don't need 4 tons of air conditioning. But with a one-size system, I'm going to have it all whether I need it or not. So what the inverter system does is it comes on and it says, hey, I'm only going to use as much capacity as I need. So this inverter system may come on at 1.5 tons at early morning when it's about 76, 77 degrees outside. Now this is a pretty big temperature swing, but just using as an example. So it comes on, and when it comes on in this 1.5 tons, it starts noticing that it can drop the temperature in the house without having to go to a higher capacity. So it does that. It runs a little longer, it removes humidity, or if it's a dry climate, it helps to even the temperatures in the room. And then only if it can't satisfy the thermostat, where the thermostat starts to creep up, will it then automatically ramp up to a higher capacity and a higher capacity and a higher capacity till the peak of the day, it gets to 4 tons, and now it needs all 4 tons. The benefit of having this type of system is with the right zoning equipment, it can communicate with these units to say, hey, I only need one zone, one area. Let's go back to the picture of the house. I only need this portion right here. These 2 bedrooms, bath, and everything. I only need those zoned. And there's a thermostat that would be on here, a zone controller that would go back to the unit and say, hey, I'm not at 75 degrees, but I need to be. Well, the thermostats over here are saying, hey, I'm over 7. I'm happy. I'm at 74, 75. I don't need any air conditioning. So what'll happen is the dampers, the ducts that go to these rooms here, they'll make sure dampers that go to these rooms here, they'll shut off. And then the ones to these rooms over here will open up because the controller, the zone controller thermostat in those areas is saying, hey, I need it. But the other ones are saying I don't. So those dampers will close off, not allowing any air and allowing the air to go down to these areas and control. So now we're not overcooling these rooms to properly cool those. Okay, and that's what's called zoning. But to properly do it, you really need an inverter system. Yes, they are more expensive, but over the period of time, they will create immense control. We're talking about the path to perfect home comfort. An inverter system with zoning is the way to do it. Now, here's the caveat with this, and this is one thing that we see a lot with HVAC contractors coming to us and asking us to help them with these things is technically, you really should not, the area that you're going to zone, especially if you're going to use an even an inverter system, but if you're going to use a single stage system, I wouldn't even bother. The inverter systems is you don't want that zone to be less, depending on the manufacturer, less than 20 to 25% of the total load. Otherwise, that zone is too small and you'll create issues. Overcooling, you'll cause issues with the backdraft of air because you're only able to push so much air. And if I have an area that's too small and my air conditioning system is only capable of going down to 20-25%, I'm going to end up overcooling that zone. It's going to cool so quickly that I'm going to defeat my purpose of running a little bit, dehumidifying, and properly cooling. So you got to keep that into mind. Zoning, we typically don't want to be any that smallest zone that we're going to cool. If we're looking at one system that is preferably an inverter, they have 2-speed systems that work, but the inverter system's the best. We don't want it to be, rule of thumb, probably about 20 to 25%. Now, when we do the load calculations, as you see here, when we do those, the software can help us make that determination of especially the time of day. So we can look at the time of day and it'll let us know during the time of day whether the frustration of it is too much during certain parts of the day where we need to say, hey, the system will tell us, hey, you need to zone this because there's too much differentiation in temperature from the east to the west side in this home, the way it's laid out, and you need to zone this off. The software tells you, so it almost, I don't want to say idiot proofs it because there's still a lot of knowledge and whatnot that goes into it. Now, some of the components, let's go here to some of the components as we don't have tons of time, but some of the components that we'll see here is basically just kind of a drawing of what. So you have the air conditioner, the air handler, you'll have a damper on the supply side here, damper on the other supply. So in the rooms, you can see here in the rooms, if you have a thermostat, once this thermostat says, hey, I need air conditioning, it sends a signal to the zone controller, which then goes back to the air handler and says, hey, I need air. And it's going to look and say, okay, well, these other ones aren't calling for cooling. They don't need cooling. And this one's going to say, I do need. So it's going to close off the dampers over here and just open them up to that room. But when you have an inverter system, it's also going to tell the system, hey, I'm closing off all these. I only need enough cooling for this. So it's going to come on at its lowest possible capacity first, and then slowly ramp up as needed. Okay, so this is just kind of a rough draft of what it looks like. If we go back to, here's what a zone damper looks like. Okay, so let me slide myself over here a little bit. So this is a zone damper. And what happens, you'll have wiring that goes to this, and inside is a damper that opens and closes. So it sends a signal to this and says, hey, I don't need air conditioning in these 2 rooms over here, but I need it in these rooms over here. So if the ductwork is designed properly, which is what Calcs does, we can then, it'll automatically say, okay, we're shutting off over here, we're sending air over here, and we're going to properly condition these spaces, still letting the system run. And again, that's the problem with the single stage unit, is I'm still blasting 4 tons of air out there. What I'm doing is I'm just blocking it off from going there without reducing the airflow. You can have a variable speed air handler, which helps a little bit. Like some of them will start off at like 40, 50, 60%. Train has an air handler that'll do 50%, 80%, 75, 80%, and then 100% for the variable speed. But it's the compressor with a true variable speed air handler that will allow you that capacity to get down into the 20-25% range. And then you can look at mini splits where you have the individual heads, and we get a lot more technical, and I'll talk about that in the book. But zoning can be a huge thing. So here next, this is kind of what a zone control. This is Honeywell's version of it. That Honeywell's very well known for their controllers and whatnot. But this is just a simple board that has wiring and controls to it that your HVAC contractor would install. If you're looking to do new construction, that's a perfect time to do this. If you're renovating your house, that's a great time. If you have an existing duct system, the duct system most likely would have to be redesigned. You can't just put dampers in and expect things to work. You could do manual dampers, but that's not part of the zoning system. They won't open and close. Something else we have is, this is what an old comfort zone is to train the main controller, where you have the zones here that you can control and program everything. So let's say, certain parts of the day, you automatically put it to say, hey, like in my house, we don't have a zone system, but we have, and I'm going to show you here in a second, an ecobee thermostat, where we have little sensors that we put in rooms. And it's basically what a zoning system would do. So when we're in our bedroom at night, we want it colder, but we don't want the living room portion of the house, or the kitchen portion of the house, or any other portion of the house that we're not in, to really have to worry about air conditioning. We don't want to dump air into there. We want to dehumidify, but we don't want to just dump a bunch of air in there that's not needed because we're not out there. So we want that to flow into the living room, and or into the bedroom, and not worry about it. So with something like this, you could have it automatic. If you go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, it can automatically say, hey, I want you to switch over to the bedroom zones. I want these areas over here, the kitchen, living room, I want them to go up to 80 degrees, which is a good number to still be able to control humidity depending on where you live. And then I want the bedroom. And this will all have it pre-programmed and good for you. This is kind of a thermostat that we have at our house, where we're not able to do zoning. We only have one system, unfortunately. So we have to do what I was telling you not to do, because we don't have the option at this point. Is we live in a big manufactured home, but these sensors go into individual rooms, and we have them programmed at specific times. So this sensor is in the master bedroom, and another sensor is in the living room, and then we have it set to say, okay, at 10 o'clock at night, we want you to look and recognize this sensor, and we want this sensor to be at the temperature that we want the house. So it doesn't care what the living room is. It only cares about what the temperature in the bedroom is. The problem is when it's 77 degrees at night, I don't need all 3 tons of my air conditioning running constantly. That's the problem with this. So now I'm still wasting a lot of air conditioning just to cool the master bedroom. But these ecobee thermostats also have the ability to hook up to a zoning system so that you can have individual temperatures a lot better. What do we have next here? Oh, that was the last of the video. So just a quick thing on zoning. They're definitely beneficial for comfort. Looking at an inverter system, yes, they are more expensive, but over the long term, they more than pay for themselves in comfort. Sometimes it's not about the dollar amount. It's about how it makes you feel. We look at ROI and return on investment, but sometimes it's not just a monetary. It's how much more comfortable it makes us feel in our homes. When we have guests, when we don't entertain, when we're in certain parts, we don't have to worry about it. But just, imagine that these hot and cold spots in the houses where you walk from one room that's cold, and by the time you get to the other side of the house, you feel like you got to you got to strip everything off, and you got to, have a fan on you, and because it's just hot. I mean, and I know people have these. We've had people mention it to us. We've designed homes a second time that somebody failed the first time. But zoning has to be done properly. It can't just be haphazardly, single system, 5-ton. I'm going to oversize the system so that I can zone all these areas off. You got to be careful. And having a third-party company like Calcs help you with that is definitely the direction that you should be going in. So hopefully we've talked about a lot of good things here today. Leave your comments in the bottom. Again, we're going to have a book on this that's going to go into a lot of detail. It's only $4.99 for the book. So if you want to get a lot more detail on this, same thing with the other videos, we'll have those books available for you to look at. And remember, you can teach the right person anything. You can't teach the wrong person anything. Are you the right person?